All right, welcome to A Skill-Based Game, a fantasy football podcast. No, wait. This is fantasy football, so welcome to Skill-Based Game, a fantasy football podcast. I'm here with, actually, Dan, if I ever talk like that, can you murder me right in the face?
Probably. I'll make sure it's slow and painful, but if that's your request, I'll be happy to oblige.
All right, sweet. Well, this is, for anyone new joining us who haven't watched any of the preliminary videos that I did, this is a podcast called Skill-Based Game. Now, my name is Eric Navarro from erictriestoohard.com, and my co-host for this podcast is the award-winning, the record-breaking, and the record-making Dan Shiraki. How are you doing today, Dan?
I'm doing just fine. Yourself?
I'm doing all right. I'm driving home from work, so this audio will be a test run. I'm utilizing right now. I've got you on speaker. I've got my recorder. I'm using my car has this thing. It's a dual cup holder technology, and I think it's actually going to sound better than most of my other podcasts. So,
a good life hack is to actually just take the divider out of both cup holders and make yourself like a little trough for soda.
A little trough for soda, just like shove a straw in there and go nuts?
Yeah, you don't always have to use a straw, though. If your driving's that good, you can kind of just lean over and just kind of let your hands take the wheel and do your fucking thing.
Sorry, only Jesus takes the wheel in my car. So, that's not true. So, can you tell everyone, I know you hate doing it, which is why I'm going to ask you to, can you tell everyone about your fantasy football credentials?
Yes, I will give people a reason to trust anything I have to say, I guess. Well, I'm part of SBNation.com fantasy football staff. I've been doing that for I think 3 years now. Prior to that, I wrote for ProFootballFocus.com on their fantasy staff. And even though I've been around, I've been doing this for about like 5 years or so, give or take. In 2014, I won the Fantasy Sports Writers Association Newcomer of the Year Award, and I'm really stoked about that. And that was for my Q&A fantasy football mailbag series called The Sack.
They made you change that from Dan's Sack, right? Or was that always just The Sack?
It was originally called Dan's Sack, but we had to go from like PG-14 to PG-13, I guess.
Yeah, it's PG-14. That's nice though. Well, it's kind of like congrats on the award. I'm glad. It's kind of like when indie rock bands who are like 15 years old, well, the band is 15 years old, they win Best Newcomer at the Grammys. So it's like Best New Artist, Arcade Fire, yeah. And they're all in their 40s. Okay, so
I like the title of Breakthrough Artist.
Breakthrough, that's an MTV one, I think?
I don't know what that is. I've just heard it way too often over the course of my lifetime, and I have no idea what that even means.
All right, so my credentials is that I beat you in 2 leagues last year. Is that what it was?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. So, your
credentials involve having a golden-crusted horseshoe up your ass.
Yeah, that's pretty much what it is. Well, you actually had an interesting statistic at our draft, one of our drafts last week. What percentage would you say fantasy football is of luck?
I'm sorry, say that one more time?
Yeah, that was a poorly worded sentence. You said fantasy football is about 80% luck, correct?
That sounds like something I would say after having a couple Boilermakers, but I would say it's about 80% luck, which is something I base on absolutely no empirical evidence. But, I think that I still maintain that you can only, and anyone will agree, anyone who knows what they're doing at least.
Yeah.
Yes, you can prepare yourself with as much football knowledge as possible, but there's always going to be that element of luck. It's why we have kickers, for Christ's sake. And, but yeah, no matter what, you can be as well prepared as possible. You can, more so than anything else, being fantasy football, you can just be right. You can just be wrong, but for the right reasons, more so than pretty much any other thing I've ever tried to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I actually bring that up just because that's why we call this podcast a skill-based game, because we're trying to, we understand that there is a good amount of luck or chance or variability, variance, whatever you want to call it, it definitely exists in any game, and I think part of what makes fantasy football so fun is that there is this element of chance that you can't, if you won your league after the draft, or if you knew who was going to win based on what your teams were going into the games, this wouldn't be fun and we wouldn't do it. But we try to take all of that luck or chance out of it when we're talking about it, and while we know that there's a lot of luck involved, we're going to try to do our best to isolate the things we can control, or at least control to the best of our abilities. Now, let's get started with our Week 1 podcast. And Dan, is it at all possible for you to go off speakerphone?
Yeah, I can do that.
If you can, I think that'll be a little bit clearer, just so we don't have dual speakerphones going.
All right, now you can hear the dulcet tones of my voice better.
Ooh, it's nice. It's nice and bassy. I think, yeah, the recorder picks up extra bass, which is always nice. Which I used to do. I used to do that too when I was single. So, aftermath of the draft. That's the first thing I want to talk about. Now, for you personally, what would you say? Two-part question. What would you say? One would be the biggest, mistake you made or shittiest thing that happened to you in a draft, because you're in a bunch of leagues, but I don't mean shittiest in the sense of something that happened by chance. Someone took your player or someone, or whatever it was. An actual mistake that you made, but didn't realize you made it until after you made the mistake. Like, you thought it was a good idea, and then looking back, you're like, I should have played that differently. What was the biggest one of those, or one that comes to your mind from your drafts?
I believe it was the great Ernest Hemingway who once said, "Write your own edits over." But when you transfer that over to fantasy football draft, it's not exactly helpful. So, if you draft drunk and tinker with your lineup sober, that's cool.
Yeah.
But, however, I will say this: not that I was intoxicated or anything.
You never do that.
I remember picking up I think it was an ESPN draft I did recently, where I picked up Jordan Reed late, and honestly, for his expected production, health permitting, like 10th, 11th round,
yeah,
it's a steal for his going rate. But I think ESPN's rankings had him basically undraftable, something like 193rd overall.
Yeah, ESPN does that a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, and I would rather, at the end of the day, I'm a huge proponent of value-based drafting. But at the end of the day, you just have to go get the players you want.
Yeah,
it's not all about
absolutely.
value. Sometimes you got to weigh the pros and cons of that. So,
and if you have one or two other people, oh, sorry, go on.
I said, granted, I might be kicking myself a little bit for drafting him that early, but at the end of the day, I can't be too mad.
Yeah, absolutely. My biggest was in our live draft. I took Dwayne Allen at tight end, but I think I took him maybe in the 11th or 12th, which to me was too early because there were still four other people. Hell, there's still one or two people on the waiver wire who I might just grab for week 1. I really could have just grabbed another flyer, maybe got somebody that, so I wouldn't have necessarily had to, I don't know, it's just a small thing. Well, it's good that both of us had our biggest, I guess, mistakes, however you want to phrase that, seem to come after round 10. So at least after we draft all of our starters. So that's pretty good. I
also don't think there's a mistake you could really make when it comes to the tight end position as well, because everyone's screwed anyway. Literally everybody besides, say, maybe Rob Gronkowski, and I mean everyone. Yes, even Jimmy Graham, Travis Kelce, Greg Olsen. Literally everyone is about upside and not about the floor.
Yeah.
So you may as well just take a crapshoot towards the end of the draft.
Yeah.
And just wind up seeing what happens.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. The other thing that I did in various leagues was, because in my mocks, I've been the sniper. I've been the guy who games it so that I grab, people just a round or two before everybody else would think to grab them. But in a couple of our leagues, there were people sniping. Oh no, there were people sniping just as good as I was for these really mid to late round value picks. Whereas I ended up thinking I was smarter than other people and going, they'll come back to me. They don't come back to you. The second you have that thought of that dude's going to come back to me, for sure, they're not coming back to you because somebody else did the same research you did always, and they'll snipe them right before you.
Yeah, no matter what sources you think you have or what analysis you think you have a leg up on. Yeah. You know,
somebody
news
else
is news.
There's 12
reports
people
from
there.
camp are reports from camp. People are going to interpret it any way they want.
Yeah. Well, there's also if you're in a room with 12 people who take it seriously, then somebody there is going to have read what you read, and somebody there is going to agree with you, and someone's going to take it. Fortunately, I actually did a thing in doing that, in letting guys go who I thought were really cool value picks. I did what Magic players will call the dangers of doing something cool, where it's like, yeah, I want to grab Arian Foster in the 4th round, or I want to grab, in a keeper league, I want to grab Jordy Nelson in the 7th or 8th, depending on like the keeper settings, if you can get them at the round that you picked them up at for the next year. That's really cool, but you're trying to win for this year, and if you found, like for me, I had options to do those things, but on the right there in the draft, I could have grabbed a starter who I liked better. So it's like I listened to my better judgment. As much as I wanted the whole draft room to explode and cheer for my amazing pick, I still you got to go with the best guys on the board.
I don't agree with the Jordy Nelson, Kelvin Benjamin drafting mid-round, even in a keeper league, because if you in that range of the draft, if you draft somebody who pans out in 2015, he's probably going to be a pretty darn good keeper at that value in 2016 as well. And without the risk of never returning to form pre-ACL injury.
Yeah, that's exactly why I had been waiting till post-round 9, 10 to pick either of them up in the keeper, but they'd never made it to me that far. So I guess I might have even lucked out in that sense, where I wasn't allowed the opportunity to potentially make a mistake. All right, well, we've talked about this for a while. Let's move on to another quickly. What is the biggest takeaway, like positive takeaway you've had from your draft? Maybe someone you picked in a spot, and then a few days later you were like, wow, that was a really good fucking pick. Like...
I've tried to talk myself out of having any sense of positivity because it's just too crushing when the first game of the season starts and half my lineup puts up goose eggs. But despite that, I've still been able to talk myself up unnecessarily. In one league, I'm really stoked about having, in a league we're in, I'm really stoked about having C.J. Anderson and Jeremy Hill as my keepers, and I lucked into the 3rd overall pick and got Eddie Lacy as well. So that triumvirate, that brings me that league alone. So
okay, so that's fine. So you're all right. So yeah, I found that in the PPR drafts I was doing, choosing to go end of the 1st round wide receiver, ended up in 3 different leagues working very well for me, because I got a couple guys at the turn who I believe should have gone maybe picks 6 and 7 in 6, 7, 8 in a PPR league, but I ended up getting them at 12 and 13 in a couple of leagues. So it worked out pretty well. So that's the thing I picked up on, that I think people overvalue running backs in some of these PPR leagues this year specifically. So
I still disagree with that, because I think at face value right now, no, I do. Like, I still think at face value that wide receivers seem like a little, I think more are going in the 1st round than before, because there definitely appears to be a drop-off from that tier 1 of guys to tier 2 or 3. But given the fact that football becomes so skewed towards passing anyway, it already is.
I know, what the rules change.
You can pretty much make the argument that most of these guys are just under the radar who haven't emerged yet anyway. Yeah. So it's not so much that Demaryius Thomas and Julio Jones aren't going to be good. Of course they are. It's just, I don't think they're going to outscore the field as much as everybody else thinks that first tier is going to.
No, that makes sense. I was more thinking, I guess, and I know this is, I hate steering towards just common things everyone's saying, but those running backs in rounds 3 and 4, I'm liking a lot, and so I feel like you can usually make up for it in that aspect. Then again,
oh yeah, and that's possible too. But I don't think a lot of the concern that I totally sympathize with for owners. I mean, I've been there too. I don't usually feel gutsy enough to think that there's going to be maybe like the 3 or 4 running backs I feel comfortable pulling a trigger on in round 3 or 4, because there just seems to be much more perceived risk there.
There is a lot more perceived risk. That is, you know what, that's a very good point. I hadn't thought about that since draft. I drafted 3 times in the last 2 days, and one of the things that kept coming up was like at the 3-4 turn, or even like at usually round 4, I'd be like, there is one running back who I'm comfortable taking, everyone else is so risky. And I was fortunate enough, there's where the chance comes in, where the one running back left that I was comfortable with ended up coming back to me. So I might just be seeing things with seeing my first 2 picks with rose-covered glasses because it worked out for me, as opposed to what normally happens.
And it totally can, and honestly, it might in most cases, but it's, you know, because it's a player, if your other owners in the league are investing that first, second round pick on running backs, and when you factor in, like we just discussed, there is a drop-off as far as wide receivers in that first, second tier, who's going to have the stones to really make those running back picks in rounds 3 or 4? A lot of people will panic and try to go for just the next best available wide receiver or tight end.
Yeah.
So then you have guys like Doug Martin, you have guys like TJ Yeldon, you have guys like Kevin Coleman even later than that. So your team actually does have a pretty good chance of rounding itself out when it comes to picking those running backs in the rounds 3 to 5 range.
Yeah, and then, but if one of them busts, you're fucked. Yeah. Well, so that's okay. You're right. I almost caught myself. I was like, yeah, if one of your starters busts, you're usually okay. So one more thing about the draft, just because something I just remembered because of what you said. I have noticed that if your pick is, like, if you're in a 12-person draft and you're picking 6th or later, or sorry, 6th or earlier, the 3rd round wide receivers that are available, I mean, I've seen some really, really, in my opinion anyway, like a Matthews or a Cooks become available to you mid-3rd round in a number of drafts. And I think that's even more reason to really, really go for a high-quality running back in the 1st round if you have the option.
All right, so just to talk about that a little bit more, 2 things. I just downloaded a new browser on this work computer that I'm using, and I wanted to get the average. I'm sorry?
Is it all incognito all the time? Is that what it is?
No, it's I mean, like 80% of the time, yeah. But yeah, I just Googled average draft positions, and right when I typed in the word average, the first result was average penile length. Which is funny for a number of reasons. Not because that's being searched, but people are searching penile over penis.
Well, I've never really heard penile in other situations, so I guess. Yeah,
like, let's get the adjective, not the noun.
Well, you want to be classy. It's a work computer, so.
Anyways, we are talking average draft position, which is I am on a website that I did not want to be on.
Okay.
1 second. Yeah. I can't type with one hand as well as the rumors suggest.
Oh man, I'd say, hey, just while you're looking that up, I'd say this is going off to a wonderful start. I am trying to watch my swearing, but I think it's futile at this point.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we are who we are, dude.
All right, so while you're looking that up, keep that in your head. I want to quickly, because every article, including you might have even written a few, because Dan, well, this is another aside, I have read so many articles this year, and turned out you wrote them. Now,
yeah, that sucks. Sucks for you, dude.
But not on purpose. It's not like, I know we're doing this over the phone, but it's not like I don't see you in person fairly often. We've been in a band together. We play in multiple leagues together. I've known you at this point for about 7 years. So the fact that I'm accidentally discovering articles you wrote after I read them already, I think it's very telling to how prolific your writing is getting.
Or it could also just be a real good testament to the folks at SB Nation who know damn well what they're talking about when it comes to search engine optimization.
Yeah,
but
that sounds like it.
yeah, absolutely.
Although, to be fair, and I'm only saying this because I know how uncomfortable compliments make you, that it's not just that I'm finding them by Googling something. I'm getting referred to those articles by other people on social media. And so people
That's interesting. Yeah, I didn't think that would happen, but I think a lot of that has to do kind of with the source of who I write about. I don't know if it's necessarily attributed to what I am saying specifically or people specifically seeking me out. I usually see a lot of that on Twitter.
Yeah.
I interact with a lot of people back and forth. I like to banter and whatnot. But yeah, I mean, I saw something the other day on something I posted about CJ Spiller, just some quick hitting analysis piece, and it kind of exploded on Reddit for a couple hundred comments, and got like thousands of views on SB Nation.
It also, I noticed a couple people sharing it on who don't actually know you, or I assume sharing it on Facebook, which was nice.
Oh, really? That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
They may have sponsored it. That might be what I saw. And it might have been one of those, these people like SB Nation. Check out this article. Well, so I don't know if you're writing anything on this, but are there any, just very briefly, because I really want to move on to the next thing, any quick, drops and pickups? Like, you can even go through the standard ones that you'll find online, but any drops and pickups you'd recommend?
I'd recommend right now?
Yeah.
Oh, Christian Michael, absolutely.
Pick him up?
Pick him up.
You drop him?
You're spending nothing to do it anyway.
Yeah.
It depends on what your budget is. I wouldn't break the bank for him if you have a blind bid or a bank system in place for free agent bidding. But absolutely, I would go for him just because his athletic upside is far, far, far too big to ignore, especially behind that offensive line. Granted, he's had his own problems. He would have been kicked out of Seattle if he didn't have them in terms of ball security, and who knows what else. So let's just, let's temper our expectations on him. He's definitely a very, very low ceiling, or very, very low floor, but very, very high ceiling kind of guy. I'm going to stash him as much as possible.
Nice. The phrase I keep hearing is, it's very rare when upside like that is just sitting on the waiver wire. And so it's like, I mean, if you're stashing other guys for half a season waiting for them to come back, this is someone who's playing and potentially has that same ability to...
Just look at his spider graph from the combine. It's out of this world, and his athleticism's through the roof. He should have gone in the draft. He was going to go maybe like 5th, 6th round, maybe even undrafted. Seahawks got him in round 2.
Yeah.
And there's obviously a reason for that.
And you're not concerned about whatever reason the Seahawks had for cutting him?
Of course I'm concerned. That's why I'm not going to invest too much. Okay. But that's why I would get him at the end of drafts. Or if I'm going to bid on him in the wire, it's not going to be for much of my budget. But I would absolutely throw my name in the hat to just get that kind of investment.
I almost said, so you throw your 10-gallon hat into the ring, and then I was like, well, that would be a bad thing to say. So I didn't say it. Okay, all right, so here's something I wanted to talk a lot about with you, because you have, every time I talk football with you, I realize how little I know about football. And you, dude, so you're very apt to applying knowledge of and making good assumptions on game scripts and applying it to how it will impact fantasy players. So, with keeping that in mind, are there any? We'll do both starts and sits, but are there any unlikely? We'll start with starts. Unlikely starts that you would say that maybe this week in particular, some of those guys who would probably be riding your bench, but they have a matchup this week or a situation this week, even if their team matchup is crappy, even if their situation matchup makes you want to maybe put them in a flex or start them as opposed to sitting them. Blah 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 blah. Repeating myself.
Well,
go.
One guy that I'm really concerned about is LaShawn McCoy. It was Rex Ryan on Wednesday said that he's practicing fully and he's going to be good to go. Hamstring injuries concern me like crazy because as a former Miles Austin owner, you know how long these things can linger, and it just happens. So, yes, I'm concerned about his health, but I also am very aware of Rex Ryan's ground and pound strategy and mindset, and also the fact that they're playing the Indianapolis Colts, who are undoubtedly going to try to put up as many points as possible. Now, the Bills have a defense that can hold their own against this offense. And in addition to that, Ryan is going to want to take as much pressure off of a quarterback making his first real start, and just having McCoy in the mix as much as possible against a very weak Indianapolis front seven makes it extremely hard for me to want to bench him. Also factor in that if you drafted LaShawn McCoy, you're going to want to sit your second round or end of first round pick anyway. It just, as much as I would like to have a better option, chances are you don't.
Yeah.
So I'm absolutely putting him in for that game.
Nice, nice. All right, so are there any guys, I guess, who we're thinking about who are kind of on that bubble where... Shit. See, this is where... do you have any kind of head-to-head things where it's let's say you're in a situation with some of those mid-round guys you drafted, and you're not sure who to start at your flex. Hey, how about this? Because I don't have a list of players in front of me. Let me just ask you about a list of players that I have that are bouncing back and forth between last flex spot or first bench spot. So let's say the pool of players, and I'm trying to think, and correct me if I'm picking players who don't fit this mold, but I'm thinking say you got Isaiah Crowell, I'm going to pick way more than, so you got one flex spot left, and you're talking about Isaiah Crowell or Eddie Royal or Joik Bell, Amir Abdullah, what's his name, Joseph Randall. I'm trying to think who else might fall in. I guess Chris Ivory, but at this point Chris Ivory's kind of a must start. But let's say we're talking about those players and maybe a few more if you want to throw some in. Who are some of the ones that you would start over who? Charles Johnson maybe is another one, if I didn't say that.
Well, to be honest, I don't think Isaiah Crowell is very advisable to start this week. I think Todd Bowles obviously knows what he's doing, and he's one of the best defensive-minded coaches that the NFL has seen in the past 5 years, in my opinion. And he also happens to inherit one of the most formidable front sevens in football. Now, I like to think the Browns would like to get Crowell going in this game. He's going to get some volume, but I don't know about his overall production. Now, that said, volume is, if you're talking about flex, volume is a very, very important factor in that decision. But because it's week one, usually there's going to be people across the board who have that kind of volume that you have, at least coming out of the gate.
Yeah.
So it's not, I wouldn't really call him a must start in week one, especially against that Jets front seven. Joseph Randall can screw himself, actually. Not personally, but fantasy Joseph Randall, yeah, I'm not touching that.
All right, excellent. Well, that helps a lot. Well, who do I start then? Because I'm going to pick. No, I'm just kidding. All right, so it sounds like okay. Well, what do you think about an Eddie Royal or a Charles Johnson? How are you feeling about them?
Charles Johnson is probably who I would rather have. He's had just so many sterling reports out of camp. Everything that I've read so far indicates that he has the strongest rapport right now with Teddy Bridgewater, more so than a Mike Wallace or Cordero Patterson, who is pretty useless, unfortunately.
Yeah. We all bit that bullet last year.
I'm sorry. Yeah, and I also kind of got lost. Who were we comparing?
Oh, I was just saying.
Eddie Royal. That's right.
Yeah.
Eddie Royal. No, I don't want any part of him because, first of all, Alshon Jeffrey, after all the secret reports and whatever about his availability, he did return to practice on Wednesday. So early in the week, coming back, that's usually a very, very strong indication that he's going to suit up. So if Jeffrey does wind up playing, have him, Martellus Bennett, and Matt Forte in the passing game without Mark Trestman calling the shots. No disrespect to Adam Gase, but it's kind of difficult to project what a guy like Eddie Royal is going to get going forward. If he's a tertiary or quaternary option, offense that has a lot of of downside. I'm not taking that over Charles Johnson this week.
Nice call. Nice call. So of all those players I named, it's Charles Johnson's probably the way to go at flex?
Is it in our league?
No, I was literally naming players who usually got tooken around that time.
I would probably take Johnson in a PPR and Crowell in a standard.
Okay. And if we're throwing names in like Macklin and who else? Wallace. Does that change anything for you?
Macklin would get the nod. Absolutely.
Okay.
I think the volume will be there for him. I don't think he's going to be the. I don't think he's going to be the primary target. I still think that's going to Jamal Charles.
Yeah.
But even with Houston's form of defense, I think he'll get a whole lot of quick hitting passes from Alex Smith, just a lot of thinking and dunking. If it's PPR, I'm absolutely going with Macklin, and I think I would take him even in standard as well.
Nice. All right, excellent. So the next thing I want to talk about, which is kind of how we'll round out this episode. So for anyone listening, you've clearly heard why Dan is on this podcast. If you're wondering why other than me owning the recorder and having a long commute, I am on this because what I lack in football knowledge, I make up for in general strategy knowledge that I've learned from being a complete nerd and played strategy games my whole life. And I started watching football in 2012, and I started playing fantasy in 2013, and in 2013 I lost both my leagues, and in 2014 I played in 3 leagues and won all 3. I know that a lot of that is luck. I know a lot of that is chance. I know a lot of that was research that I made up for. But what I think gave me the edge in a lot of situations is playing into various aspects of strategy that applies more to the rules of fantasy football as a game than fantasy football as football knowledge. So what I want
and the nerds are going to beat the meatheads every time.
Nerds beat, well, I mean, not in person. Maybe.
No, not like the things like getting laid or like making money or being successful, but in fantasy football, yeah, man, it's all about the nerd.
I thought you were going to end that with getting laid, making money, fantasy football, but what? Wait, what were we talking about? All right, so, okay, I'm trying to think of a nerdy guy on the Patriots, because I want to be like, oh no, who's the guy who just made the Texans? I don't know if you watched Hard Knocks last night. The studious guy. I missed
the last episode.
The studious guy made the team. What's his name? Christian Campanera? No, that's a different guy. Whatever. Nerdy guy from Hard Knocks is going to beat Gronk in fantasy football every time? Is that what I'm hearing?
I don't remember that. I don't recall it.
Never mind. Don't even worry about it. Terrible joke. Too much explanation. Moving on. So, what I want to talk about is, it's a two-parter. One is overall strategy for weeks 0 through 3, because I think there is a definite change in how you should be planning your strategy from the first 3 weeks, and then the rest of the season. That's partially due to bye weeks, partially due to resource management, and believe me, I'll get all into resource management on another episode of the podcast. We're going to end every one of these podcasts with a general strategy discussion, and one of the resources that you end up having to manage towards the end of your season is losses. Losses are a resource that you can use to your advantage. In the
Go on, I'm sorry.
I was going to say, in the first 3 weeks, what I want to call this strategy discussion is the importance of winning your first 3 weeks. Now, obviously, everyone's going to try to fucking win their first 3 weeks. That's not a strategy. But the importance of playing to win your first 3 weeks is, or at least go 2-1. Do the best thing, whatever, make it the best you can to win those first 3 weeks. And so, in starting that, Dan, did you have anything to add just on the overall topic, or should I start with specifics? I have a whole bullet point list here.
It's just something I'm curious about overall. I think it's something you can expand upon. But as far as the first 3 weeks, a lot of it is largely structured around how you drafted your team and what kind of strategy you used. If you took a lot of boom or bust guys in the later rounds, maybe start them, but maybe that with maybe some higher floor guys instead of higher ceiling instead. And the other big thing is just try not to go too crazy on, because injuries are going to happen. There's going to be a backup running back or two or three in those first couple weeks who's going to have everyone clamoring.
Okay, so Dan, we'll hit these. I promise we're going to hit these one at a time. I got you, baby.
That's fine.
So the first thing, just to keep, because I'm extremely rigid when I write something down, it has to be exactly in the same order. The first thing is, we don't know really anything in those first 3 weeks. We don't know how things are going to shake out. And I noticed you were kind of going in there, so I wanted to dive right into it. Injuries are going to happen. Backups may outperform starters. Things are not necessarily going to shake out how we expected them to. People might have bad games due to matchups. People might have bad games due to having an off day and get another chance the next week and start righting the ship. Hell, some players, you remember, Jamal Charles for the first 3 weeks last year, Tom Brady for the first 4. Like, for the first 3 weeks, with your trades and your drops and your ads for that matter, be extremely cautious and don't make any super bold moves, because you really don't know how it's going to shake out. And I feel that people end up with a fear of, I want to be the first guy to grab that hot prospect who's going to blow up, or I want to be the first guy to drop that, bigger player because they're obviously, on the downswing. So that's like the first thing. I just want to point out that we don't really know as much as we think we know at first.
And that is a very important distinction, and I think we're scratching the surface of something much bigger here in terms of just the psychology of fantasy owners, which I think you and I are going to write a book on one day.
Oh yeah, I would love that.
Last year, I would man the SB Nation fantasy war room, where for blocks of hours at a time, I would be the guy answering starter sit questions or whatever, roster decisions for users who would send me things. And so often, I would get a question about, Eddie Lacy, say Eddie Lacy only ran for 40 yards one week.
Yeah.
Too often, I would get the question, so is it time for me to give up on Eddie Lacy? And it took everything in me not to throw my computer into an abyss.
Yeah.
But the answer is no, it is not time for you to give up on Eddie Lacy, because you are not playing to win week to week. You are playing to win the season.
Yeah.
And you're going to be fine.
Yep. And I liked how you had mentioned before about if you're going to buy into this strategy of drafting so you can win the first 3 weeks, which I'm going to explain my reasons why it's so important to win those first 3 weeks, as opposed to winning those 3 weeks somewhere else, I guess would be the way to phrase it, is drafting guys that are less boom or bust, higher floors. Because the thing with rookies, well, first off, new systems. When a team has a new system or a player goes into a new system, even if they're a very well-established player, this can throw things in a complete loop. There's a less percentage of things getting thrown in a complete loop than if it were a brand new player into a new system. However, rookies especially, the difference between college and the NFL is wild. It is wildly unpredictable how rookies are going to do. And correct me if I'm wrong, but it's just that makes me instantly give the nod. If I have a rookie ranked or in the same, using value-based drafting, in the same tier as someone who's been in the NFL for even a year, whether it's a year, 2 years, I don't care how little they've been in, knowing that they can perform at the NFL level, if they're even to me, tips the scales in favor of the veteran, so to speak.
Well, a big question about that is, it's all about risk management there. Yes, rookies have higher variance, but you also can't ignore that top half of that variance. So it depends on what kind of prospect they are, how prospects similar in measurables and situations have done in the past. Obviously, each draft is its own entity, and each rookie is his own person. But I think the modern-day example of that would be Devontae Freeman and Tevin Coleman in Atlanta. Now, it was recently shown that Coleman's getting the starting nod, whatever that means, still a committee approach for all we know. But you have Freeman, who is in his second year, who is a little bit smaller than Coleman, still has some burst, and granted, it will be his first year in a new system, mind you, with Kyle Shanahan now the offensive coordinator. But then you have this rookie, Kevin Coleman, who is a bit of an unknown. Freeman didn't really do so hot his first year in terms of production. And Coleman, what we do know about him is that he is a 6'1", 220-pound back who ran a 4.340, has insane acceleration, and has a 2,000-yard season under his belt in college. Granted, you can't put too much stock in that.
Yeah.
Who are you going to pick at that average draft position?
And you know who I'm gonna pick is someone else. Like that's kind of what I'm saying. It's the risk. So that's what I mean about you're mentioning the risk management. I am very much suggesting to limit that risk management if you're picking a starter. And they were both going, well, maybe not towards the end, but towards the end of when people are drafting. But if you were picking a few weeks ago, they were tending to go where I would rather just pick somebody else who I'm more confident going right into my starting lineup. And by starters, I always mean I ignore QB and tight end when I think of that.
Yeah.
So, like, if you're standard, I think almost all my leagues are in ESPN, and standard ESPN is a flex, 2 running backs, and 2 wide receivers. So, to me, my first 5 rounds that I'm picking, I try to limit my risk as much as possible. Like, that's what I'm focused on. So, and then, once it's beyond there, go fucking nuts. So, the reason why I so recommend these strategies to try to win the first 3 weeks is, one, as I mentioned before, you're able to use your resources down the line. Everyone has a certain number of losses that they can sustain before they're out of playoff contention. It doesn't matter if you go undefeated or if you have 5 losses. If 5 losses gets you into the playoffs, it got you into the playoffs, and losses in the regular season don't mean shit in the playoffs. So I like to use my losses as best I can. Like, for instance, one year, I'll touch on this quickly and then move on because we'll do a much greater discussion about resources in the coming weeks. I was able to make a trade in week 4, in between weeks 4 and 5, where I traded a couple of my guys who I knew were probably going to have hot weeks for the next few weeks. Like, I think Asatya was one, or maybe this was in between weeks 3 and 4. It was right before Asatya had a 3-touchdown game, which made the trade look great for my opponent. And it was like him and a couple other guys who I figured I would have for maybe the next 4 or 5 games, but I would rather trade them up for a stud. And I traded them all up for DeMarco Murray. And I traded them to the team who, because of utilizing the losses, I was 3-0. He was 1-2. Or maybe he was even 0-3, and he really needed to do something to get back into it. And so we made this trade. He was able to win the next couple weeks, and I traded for I'm trying to remember exactly how it went. I think the next week, my team was sufficiently, crappier due to both bye weeks and making this trade. I got rid of a lot of depth for it. However, I was playing a team that was I knew they were just going to crush me. The matchup, especially for that week, was not looking good. And I did the math. I would have lost by still about 40 points had I not made the trade. Instead, I lost by about 60. But I utilized that first loss. I was happy to go 3-1, and I mean, just rode DeMarco Murray out with a little less depth, but I was able to pick up players off the waiver wire throughout the rest of the season and slowly build my team back up. And it was just fine. And had I not gone 3-0 and was basically willing to just take that loss, then I probably would have valued my a potential win more than a potential trade, and the trade ended up working out way in my favor. For it probably won me far more games than just losing that one. So that's an extreme example, like a very specific example, but it's just really important. It's just with fantasy football.
But, you can't really be 0-3 at a point and be struggling and not think and delude yourself into thinking that your roster is just fine. That is one of my biggest pet peeves around the league.
Yeah.
That some people don't understand is that a trade can work out for both owners. Yes. Not every trade has a winner or loser.
In fact, every trade should work out for what both owners needs. I basically gave the dude 3 straight wins, and he gave me a player who won me the league in the end. Like that was the trade, which is, and so I also want to point out, whenever I talk about situations like this, I always get really afraid people are going to go, well, when is that going to come up? When's that going to come up? The point is, you need to create environments where situations like that can come up. And one of the ways to do that, to put yourself in a power position to give yourself the best options if the pieces fall in the right place, because this trade also, it worked out for both teams because of the positions we had. It just was also worked out that the guy who was 3-0 had the pieces that the 0-3 guy needed, and vice versa. It's you just have to put yourself in that position to be in the power move when the circumstances line up. And throughout your season, it's a long season and a lot of things happen, a lot of teams, stars will line up. You just have to put yourself in the right position for them to do that. So that's one. So it's trades and using your losses as a resource, especially during bye weeks, is a huge factor in that. So then the other thing is drafting to win the first 3 rounds. And this may be a little too late because I know the season starts tomorrow and I'll post this tonight, but if your draft happens to be tonight or tomorrow, one of the things that I'm looking into, and I want to get your feedback on this, and then we'll be done with the episode, unless you have anything at the end you want to add, other than plugs, of course. I was noticing a trend that I loved the idea of doing, but none of my I worked in lots of mock drafts, but none of my 4 real drafts this year, the situation never like really unfolded for me to do this. To pick up guys who, if you believe in them, you say like a Foster or Gurley who are injured, or like an Abdullah Randall Spiller, if you believe, is what I have in quote or in parentheses here, that they'll do well as the season goes on. To pick up them in the rounds where the rounds where you'd normally grab a starter, like 4 through 6, because that's where a lot of those guys are going, and then pair them with these later round guys who you can get in rounds like 7 through 9, like your D'Angelo Williams, I know people hate whatever, or your Eddie Royal, or I guess before Trey Mason was hurt, Trey Mason, or even Martellus Bennett, if you want to like grabbing him, and if there's a tight end you believe will be good down the line, or if you think Martellus Bennett's going to be good enough in certain leagues to start in your flex for the first couple weeks, because he seems to have hot starts. So what do you think about that kind of pairing where you pair a mid-round guy who is going to be amazing later with a later round guy who might give you a couple good weeks of solid production?
It's risky, in my opinion, because what you've basically done is take into consideration the Lions situation with Amir Abdullah, who had a 4th round ADP, and Joyce Bell, who was going at the end of the 6th, early 7th. Abdullah is listed, for what it's worth, put as much stock in this as you want, is listed as the team's 3rd running back on the depth chart right now. Granted, that's just for week 1. But it's more so that if you take a running back from the same team in round 4 and 7, you're pretty much resigning one of those to not work out over the course of the year. They're very rare occurrences. And
you're also probably ensuring that it's a coin flip. It's also you're ensuring there's a coin flip for the first 3 weeks. Because you don't really know how it's going to shake out. Well, that's also a good point, because even in that, your situation's a little different than the one I was describing, but the one I'm describing, it's also really risky now, because not only are you betting on a crappier player to do well for a few weeks because of the opportunity they've been given, like a D'Angelo Williams, but you're also gambling that Foster's going to come back strong, which I believe in, but so you're also gambling that Gurley, a rookie, is going to perform and when he comes back from injury, and you're also gambling on these other guys like Abdullah Randall or Spiller or Freeman, Coleman, that it's like you're gambling twice instead of just gambling once. So
exactly, especially with Gurley, even as impressive of a prospect as he is, he doesn't have much going in his favor other than the situation.
By the way, I love talking this stuff out, because when I wrote all this down, that was a reason to support my strategy of winning the first 3 weeks, and in talking it out with you, I decided that's actually a terrible way to try to win your first 3 weeks.
I mean, it's just a matter of how the season unfolds. And speaking of unfolding, something I got to mention is Arian Foster tore his freaking groin muscle off the bone.
Which, by the way, sounds painful, but also sounds delicious. Like, that makes me want to go to Outback Steakhouse right now. I don't know why.
Like, fall off the bone
Fall off the bone groin. Ooh, delicious.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Then again, when
exotic.
Then again, I forgot it was groin, not hamstring, and I feel like hamstring meat is probably more tasty than, I don't know, Arian Foster.
There's not a ton of precedent for it, to be honest. Fred Taylor had a similar injury, like back in 2001 or something with Jacksonville, and I know Danny Amendola had that injury last year, or not last year. I think it was 2013. He did it in the first game, and he didn't come back until after week 10. Yeah. So go with that timeline what you will, but I do know that he didn't look great on his return.
All I'm thinking about now is going to Outback Steakhouse and getting baby back ribs and drinking a Foster's because of this situation.
I don't know, dude. I mean,
with a bunch of white people, so it's Arian Foster's.
I kind of always go for some ribs, but man groin usually isn't the thing that sparks that idea for me.
Yeah, I think your joke was funnier, but did you hear what I said, Dan?
Oh no, I totally cut you off.
I said we're gonna go to Outback Steakhouse with a bunch of white guys so we can drink Foster's with Arians. Let it lay there. No, just let it lay there and let me learn from my mistakes. Okay, so that would have been nice if I had a nice transition there. All right, so that is what wraps up my strategy topic for this. Next week, what I want to talk about is streaming, which I think in between, I'm trying to time these strategy discussions so that they line up with the things you're going to want to do that week. So we're gonna talk about streaming next week, along with unlikely starts and sits from you, talk about drops and pickups from you, and any other, general football knowledge. I'm gonna, defer to you. Do you have any last thoughts for going into week one? And give us your plugs. Anything that's coming out for you in this next week, how we can find you on social media.
Definitely find me at social media at the Sack SBN, as an SB Nation. So that's at the Sack SBN. I will answer whatever fantasy questions you may have, and listen to Parks Landing and listen to Heavyweight.
Oh, thanks for plugging my band too. So you can find this other podcast like this one on erictriestoohard.com. Go to our YouTube page. I guess just search Eric Tries Too Hard, and you can find, if you're still having a draft, you can find the mock drafts I put up, which, and I think I mentioned this to you this weekend, Dan, have now accumulated over 7,000 views, and I forgot to monetize them. So there's like $50 out the window. Anyway,
that's 25 cents you'll never see again.
Yeah, I think I have friends who do well on YouTube, and it's more than that. Find other podcasts for that, and definitely keep listening. We'll be doing these every Wednesday afternoon, and I'll be getting them up on Wednesday evenings. For Dan Shiraki, I'm Eric Navarro, and this is Skill Based Game, a fantasy football podcast. All right, see you, dude.
All right, take it easy, man.
Peace.